This week, we had one of the most unlikely things happen in American politics. A corporate Democrat, Senator Joe Manchin specifically, went on TYT for an interview with Cenk Uygur. Yes, that actually happened. So, first of all, I'll give him credit for going on a program that he knew would actually challenge him. But the question is, why would he do this? Why would someone who is clearly a corporate Democrat go on a show that rails against corporatism and corruption all the time? Well, I'll give you the reasons why in 3 words. Paula Jean Swearingen. She's his progressive challenger that's running a campaign akin to Bernie's. And considering that all 55 counties in West Virginia actually went to Bernie during the 2016 primaries, Joe Manchin knows that he's in big trouble, which is why he now wants senators to not campaign for primary challengers of other senators. Because let's be clear here, it's obvious that he's afraid that Bernie Sanders' endorsement of his progressive opponent could put her over the top. So he probably felt pressure to extend an olive branch to the progressives in West Virginia that he has continuously screwed over, now that he has a progressive primary challenger. But throughout the course of the interview, it was very obvious that he was trying to pander to progressives. But what was strange about this interview wasn't that he came off as a disingenuous politician to me, because that was obvious and I expected that. But the responses, quite frankly, were borderline incoherent. Like, he said things that made no sense at all. For example, he tried to explain what's wrong with the Democratic Party, and his answer was we'll call it perplexing.
In West Virginia, believe the party that they had always associated with was the working person, helping the working person, helping a person that was down and out, trying to get back up and on their feet. Now that party in the philosophy of Washington it's become so politically correct that it's the party that prevents working people from working. The overreach, overregulation, over-intervening and interfering. I can just tell you about West Virginia.
So the Democratic Party is hemorrhaging voters because they've become so politically correct that their political correctness is subsequently stopping people from working because of overregulation. Like, his answer, it made no sense whatsoever. And this is because I think he started to try to diagnose the problems of the Democratic Party by trying to talk about political correctness, and then mid-sentence he decided to change the topic to regulations. But political correctness and regulations aren't necessarily related. And furthermore, if you're going to talk about regulations or political correctness, that's not the real reason why voters feel disenfranchised with the Democratic Party. The reason why the Democratic Party continuously loses elections is because of their ongoing corporatism. And Joe Manchin is the main example of a corporate Democrat. So in this next clip, Cenk Uygur explains to him that people are frustrated with the fact that Democratic Party establishment members, they'll take money from their donors and then in turn vote in a way that appeases their donors. And that's what's wrong with the party. So listen to Joe Manchin's answer when Cenk questions him about this.
So let's go to some of those issues that you just mentioned there, overregulating. For example, you voted to repeal the stream protection rule. And your top donor is First Energy, that wound up getting in some degree of trouble for putting arsenic in a pond. It seems like they would benefit from the repeal of that regulation. So did that have anything to do with your vote?
No. Jenks, I know it's hard to believe, and I know it's hard for people to, I don't have any idea who gives me money. I don't solicit from the standpoint that you do this for me, quid pro quo. That's never been me. That's not my political mantra at all.
So Senator Manchin, I want to show you a graphic here, graphic 1, and then if we can 2 as well. But let's start with 1. This is the list of your top donors. I thought you said that you don't, I understand that you said you don't do quid pro quo. That was clear.
Yeah.
But you know who your top donors are, right?
I do not.
You don't know who your top donors are?
I do not. You're showing me something I've never seen.
Okay, so this is from Open Secrets.
I know you have, Jenks, I know that it's hard for anyone to believe. I do not. I never have. And I've been around this process for a long time. Never have. I had a person one time come to my office when I was governor, Jenks. And they come in, they said, they were asking for something that didn't make any sense to me at all. And they said, well, you know, we had a big fundraiser for you. And I said, oh, you did? Well, I would have thought you were investing in good government. I guess we were both wrong. So tell me how much, I'll make sure you get it back.
So, all right, I believe that the audience out there, I got to be honest with you, Senator, is going to be in a little bit of disbelief that.
Well, there's still those of us who are involved in public service for the sake of serving the public.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
Yeah, so that was just a bold-faced lie. I don't believe a single word that came out of his mouth, and this is because what he's saying flies in the face of all other reports we've heard about fundraising in Congress. So for example, Representative David Jolly, who's a Republican, stated that their #1 priority is fundraising. Now this is what he was told upon his electoral victory, so it's not him saying that his priority is fundraising, it's him being told that that's his #1 priority as a politician. And fundraising is so significant that politicians are now being referred to as telemarketers because they're on the phones basically all day soliciting for bribes. Did I say bribes? I meant donations. But regardless if he wants to acknowledge it or not, money in politics is a noxious virus. It's literally destroying our democracy. And that's a fact that is backed up by data. Average voters have a statistically insignificant say on policy when you compare them to the elites who have all the say, and special interests who have all the say. But what's strange is that even though Joe Manchin states that he has no idea who his donors are and he never solicits for donations, he believes that money in politics is in fact a problem.
Your small individual contributions make up only 1% of the money coming in from 2013 to 2018 into your campaigns. So 99% big money, 1% small money. So I wonder if you're for getting big money out of politics. It's a literal question, or do you think the current system is fine?
Oh, the current system is not fine. The current system has destroyed the politics or the government as we know how we go through this process of electing people. The dark money coming in is horrible. It's not the money the candidates run. Forget about that, Jenks. That money's not going to make a difference in who wins and who loses. It's the dark money coming in that we have no control whatsoever. Citizens United is absolutely destroying our country. And it should be outlawed. It should be done away with. It should have never come into being.
So do you think there should be public financing instead of private financing of elections?
I tried public finance when I was governor of West Virginia and supported it. Absolutely.
I surprisingly am finding myself in agreement with Joe Manchin on something, but my question to Joe is, if you are in favor of getting money out of politics, why haven't you sponsored a bill that moves us closer to publicly financed elections? In fact, you don't even have to sponsor a bill, because in 2015, Senator Dick Durbin actually sponsored S-1538, which is the Fair Elections Now Act. Now, this bill isn't perfect, but it moves us closer towards encouraging citizens to donate by giving them reimbursements up to 50%, which should hopefully make politicians less reliant on big money donors. So since this bill exists, someone like Joe Manchin, who said, quote, Citizens United is absolutely destroying the country, well, he's co-sponsored this bill, right? Well, when you look at the bill, it now has 27 co-sponsors, of course, including the likes of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but we even see some corporate Democrats like Claire McCaskill who decided to co-sponsor this bill. But absent from this bill's list of co-sponsors is Senator Joe Manchin. So apparently, Joe Manchin doesn't actually care about getting money out of politics. Surprise, surprise. So what he said there was just an attempt to pander to progressives. And what's interesting to me is that if Joe Manchin doesn't know who any of his donors are and never solicits multinational corporations for donations, then wouldn't the same be true for his colleagues? So if money in politics isn't a problem when it comes to Joe Manchin, even though he votes with his donors most of the time, money in politics is still destroying democracy. Absolutely, he said, when it comes to everyone else. So he's the only person in Congress who is not soliciting bribes. What he's saying here is inherently contradicting what he wants us to believe.
Your second largest donor, I know you say you don't look at the list, but is Mylan, and you've got to know about that one, right?
Sure. I know. I mean, I didn't know the amounts, and honestly, because I pay no attention. But my daughter, being the CEO of Mylan, they've been very much involved.
But Senator Manchin, and I know your daughter's is here. I'm less concerned about that. I look at the donor list. I am concerned about that. And
sure.
They increased the price of EpiPen by 600%, and everybody knows that, and that was a big story in the press. But the one that really got my attention was when Health and Human Services said they defrauded American taxpayers to the tune of $1.27 billion. So I'm wondering if you think that they should pay all of that money back, because they did a settlement where they only paid back 400 some odd million. That leaves another $800 million they could pay back, or whether the government should stop working with Mylan if they're given their record of defrauding the U.S. government.
Well, I guess that'll be in the court system. I don't know anything except I know that would be in the court system if that's the case. The federal government would take it. If a federal government takes a settlement, then you got to think that they didn't have much of a case to take a settlement. I don't know enough about that, Jenks, to speak on that issue. I've tried to stay out of these issues because of our relationship. I love my daughter unconditionally. The most beautiful person with the biggest heart I've ever met.
So his daughter has a big heart. Oh, really? Is that so? Look, I understand that he's not going to speak negatively about his daughter, but since I have no emotional attachment to his daughter, I'll go ahead and do that for him. Your daughter is a bad person, and she's also a crook. She is the CEO of a company that defrauded American taxpayers, and she raised the prices of EpiPens by 600%. If you don't know what EpiPens are, they save lives. And your daughter decided that even though her decision to raise the prices of EpiPens by 600% might cause some people who need them to not be able to afford them, some of which will subsequently die as a result of her decision, she decided that she was going to do that anyway, so that way she can increase her company's profits and take home a nice bonus. Someone who does that doesn't have a big heart. Someone who does that is devoid of compassion. But this interview gets even more ridiculous because, as you all know, as I stated at the beginning of the show, Joe Manchin encouraged his colleagues to sign a pledge to protect the status quo. But in this next clip here, Jenks calls him out. And he also decides to dig his nose while Cenk is asking him the question.
You got a mixed record there, to be honest, Senator Manchin, in West Virginia too. I mean, in '96, when you were running a primary against Charlotte Pritt and she won, saying to not support her and support Cecil Underwood, the Republican, instead. So why did you do that, and why did you lobby against a fellow Democratic colleague in West Virginia?
It wasn't that. I'm a West Virginian first, and I just wanted to have the best person I thought had the capacity and the capability of running the state.
I'm sure. And what's funny about his answer here is that he is literally conflating elections as being in a hostile work environment, because since everyone in Congress is after each other's jobs and they're constantly trying to kick each other out of Congress, well, that makes being a congressman or a congresswoman tantamount to being in a hostile work environment. I'm not joking. He actually said this.
I go to work every day in Washington in a hostile environment.
So it's very clear that up to this point in the interview, his answers were not impressive at all. But when they got into policy, as you would have expected, things got even crazier.
So let's go to some of the issues. Medicare for All, now backed by your colleague that you mentioned earlier, Elizabeth Warren. Tammy Baldwin looks like she's going to support it. Obviously, Bernie Sanders on board, and the list is growing. Kirsten Gillibrand. So what's your position on Medicare for All?
Medicare for All, or the one-payer system I think we're talking about, I think it should be debated. I think that there should be a working group looking at all aspects of that. If we're trying to make the public believe that we can have a market-driven system in healthcare that we do today, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's market-driven, that you're going to get the same services through a one-payer system, or you're going to pay the same taxes that you're paying now. Whatever you're paying is going to be the same. I think that's not correct and not accurate and not an honest attempt at telling the people what it's going to take in order for us to go that direction.
So according to Joe Manchin, telling people that they're going to be paying the same amount of taxes for a single-payer system, which none of us are actually contending that's something that is dishonest and inaccurate. But I'm glad that he brought up honesty and being accurate, because for people like Joe Manchin who talk about the increase in taxes on, a single-payer system, which is likely to happen, he likes to conveniently ignore the fact that even though taxes may go up slightly as a result of us having a single-payer system, well, what also happens is that we no longer have to pay our monthly insurance premiums, and we no longer have to pay for expensive deductibles. So in result, we'll actually have more money in our pockets. So he doesn't like to talk about that, but yet he wants to call out our dishonesty when we bring up single payer. So if you want to talk about honesty and claim to care about honesty, why is it that you and your pro-corporate colleagues always conveniently leave out this part of the discussion? It's because you're the one that's being dishonest. Now, getting back to his answer, obviously he didn't answer the question, and Cenk gave him even more attempts to try to give a coherent answer, and of course, the discussion went nowhere.
So are you in favor of it or no?
We have this young boy, this young child. I just was thinking of England right now, in London, UK. This one child, right? They're deciding now whether that child gets services or not. I don't think that would be a decision we'd make in America.
So you're not for Medicare for all? I'm just trying to understand.
I'm looking at it. I want to do whatever is best.
What?
We have this young boy, this young child. I just was thinking of England right now, in London, UK. This one child, right? They're deciding now whether that child gets services or not.
Okay. I want to read back that quote to try to make sense of it because I've got nothing. So he states, we have this young boy, this young child. I just was thinking of England right now, in London, UK. Never heard of it. I love how he's clearly trying to stall here because he doesn't know where he's going with this because clearly he pulled it out of his ass. But nonetheless, he states, this one child, right? They're deciding now whether this child gets service or not. And I don't think that's a decision we'd make in America. Okay, is this even a real story? What child are you even talking about, Joe? Is this the child that you're talking about, Joe? Is his name Harry? So clearly, I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm sure that children in England aren't dying because they're being denied medical coverage. He must be thinking of America. But nonetheless, when he talks about wanting to have a debate about single payer, it's a cop-out, and that's an answer that won't suffice. So when somebody asks you about single payer, this is how you answer that question. Pay attention, Joe. So as you probably know, Bernie Sanders is going to be reintroducing a companion bill in the Senate to HR 676, which is basically a Medicare for all system. So if you are elected, would you support something like that so that way we can move towards a Medicare for all type system?
Absolutely. I think as much as West Virginia sacrificed, I think we do deserve health care for everybody.
And of course, that was Paula Jean Swearingen, who is Joe Manchin's 2018 primary challenger. And we're kind of seeing this pattern here. The people who are in favor of single payer, they don't mince words. They just explicitly state their position. You ask whether or not they're in favor of single payer, and the first word that comes out of their mouth is absolutely. That's the type of answer that we're looking for. So clearly, Joe Manchin is not in favor of single payer, but knowing where the country is heading, he doesn't want to explicitly state that because that's an unpopular opinion to have. So instead, he does this tap dance and says, well, I want to have a debate. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this and that. And it's just a cop-out. You're not in favor of single payer. But moving on to why he decided to vote to arm Saudi Arabia, this was his response.
I asked a lot of questions on that. When I was on armed services for 6 years, I was concerned about absolutely because the so-called smart bombs weren't being used very smartly. And there was still collateral damage. We were all concerned about that.
Now, I'm glad that he's in favor of limiting collateral damage, but we're not talking about collateral damage when it comes to Saudi Arabia's war crimes in Yemen. We're talking about them targeting civilians. They are targeting schools and hospitals. And there has been thousands of deaths of innocent civilians in Yemen. And he claims to care about the situation in Yemen in spite of the fact that he decided to arm Saudi Arabia.
You're talking about Yemen and
yes.
Horrible situation. I have access to these professionals, and you're talking about the best of the best, and they're giving you their information that they have, and you have to dissect it. and go with that. And that's what I did.
So he knows about the human rights abuses that are being carried out in Yemen by Saudi Arabia, but yet because of these so-called experts who told him to vote to arm the Saudis so that way they can use our weapons to do even more war crimes in Yemen, he decided to go with it anyway. So let me just give you a piece of advice, Joe. These so-called experts either should be fired from their job because they don't know about the atrocities that are being carried out with our weapons by Saudi Arabians, or they're just immoral and they do know what's going on. So either way, it's lose-lose when you listen to the experts. Now, moving on, Cenk asked him how he's going to appeal to Democrats, especially in West Virginia, who voted for Bernie Sanders in all 55 counties, and this is what he had to say about that.
Bernie's not a Democrat. He won't register as a Democrat, okay? I respect Bernie and like Bernie, and we have great conversations. But the facts are the facts.
So to Joe Manchin, that D in front of someone's name is everything. It doesn't matter that Bernie Sanders votes with Democrats more than Joe Manchin does, but Bernie Sanders, he doesn't have a D in front of his name. He's not registered as a Democrat, so therefore, he should have no say in the party. But the problem with this argument is that most people in the country are now registered as independents and they don't identify with one of the two parties, so that's only an argument that you use to delegitimize someone when you have nothing else to hold against them. But finally, to end the interview, Joe Manchin decided to give one last fuck you to progressives.
And I guess when you talk about progressives, you're talking about the liberal wing that think that I should be more liberal and more liberal, if you will. I want to think I'm more responsible and more compassionate.
So Joe Manchin isn't progressive because he wants people to think that he's more compassionate and responsible, as if progressives aren't actually compassionate and responsible. Now, I don't think that he intentionally meant for that to sound as condescending as it did, but the implication is hilarious. You're not responsible, nor are you compassionate, and neither is your daughter. So it's very clear that Joe Manchin only went on the Young Turks because he wanted to try to repair his image among progressives, which is badly damaged, but unfortunately, I think that this interview actually brought him down even more in my book, because now I know just how disingenuous he is, because, prior to him going on the Young Turks, he at least was seemingly a straight shooter, because he said, look, I'm not changing, vote me out and find somebody who can beat me. So we then took him up on this offer, and Paula Jean Swearingen is now primarying him, and now he's trying to lie and pander to us. Now he's worried about his prospects in the Senate. Well, it's too late for that. Now the people of West Virginia know that you don't care about them, that you're not looking out for them. So if they actually want someone who's going to represent their interests, then they're going to vote for Paula Jean Swearingen. And you absolutely should be worried, given that in your state, Democratic voters are overwhelmingly inclined to go for the progressive instead of the corporatist. So if you'd like to support the campaign of Paula Jean Swearingen, you can go to paulajean2018.com and donate to her so we can help kick Joe Manchin's ass out of Congress. Because what he did here, it's not helping his image. It's too late. You're just too far gone. You're too corporatist. Register as a Republican and run again. But for now, you've got to get out of Congress, Joe. Sorry.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.